Hope everybody's all right. My name's Chris Hoyle. You can probably see that at the bottom of the screen. And I'm in Manchester today, where it's beautifully sunny. You can see why it's often called the Caribbean of the North. It's looking out the window here. And hope you'll enjoy the session which we've got in store for you. Maybe you had a chance to see some of the videos already. We did a speech in the concert hall of the RNCM. I did that together with Catherine Yates, who's the Deputy Head of Strings. And maybe you've seen some of the recordings we've done on YouTube. I think there was some suggested ones on this Open Day website. So you can check those out on YouTube if you like. So I'm one of 7 people who's going to have a role in speaking today. So how about we just say a quick hi from some of the other contributors. You can probably see their smiling faces on the screens. Over to you for a minute.
Hello, my name's Donald Grant and I'm Deputy Head of Chamber Music here at the Northern, so I look after the strings chamber music in particular.
Great, and I'm Catherine Yates, Deputy Head of Strings, violinist and viola player.
I'll just unmute you, Jacob. If I could. There you are.
Okay, yeah, I'm Jacob. I'm a 4th year student here. I study cello with Nicholas Trigstad.
Thanks, Jacob. Beth, would you like to say a little hello to us?
Yeah, hi, I'm Beth. I was a viola student. I left last summer. I did 2 years at the Northern and I had Vicky Wardman as my teacher.
Thanks, Beth. Looks like Chris is next on my screen.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a 1st year violinist at the RNCM and I study with Steve Wilkie.
Lily, over to you.
I'm Lily. I play the violin and I left the RNCM last summer like Beth. I did 6 years at the RNCM and I learnt with the Aussies of Oni.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So to give you the full picture, we've got, you can see a 1st year student who was probably where many of you were a year ago now. We've got a final year student, and we've also got students who have recently graduated from here, who can give you some perspective looking back on their studentship here. To get things going, I wonder whether, Donald, you'd like to talk for a little bit about chamber music. Many of you might have been at his session this morning, so I'm afraid I wasn't there. I was somewhere else. So, but I'll just leave you to have the floor for a minute. Over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so I'm Donald, and as well as working here at the college, I also play in a string quartet called the Elias Quartet. And we were actually formed at the Northern. I did my undergrad at the Northern, then did 2 years postgrad, a junior fellowship, and I'm very happy that 4 years ago I also came back to teach. We talked quite a lot this morning about chamber music in general, but I thought I'd maybe make this a little more specific to strings now and tell you what would happen when you come to college. So what would happen when you roll up at the door in September? I would already know you. I would have looked through files and read all about you. And then in the first week of college, we organise a speed dating chamber music day. And that is basically where we try to organise as many combinations of students playing chamber music together. You'll be sent the music in advance and you'll run around lots of different rooms, meeting lots of different people. And we also have tutors that go around and they watch these sessions as they happen. After that, usually about a week later, I meet all the 1st year students individually. We have a chat, I hear you play, I hear about what experience you might have had in chamber music. And after that, we try and put you in groups that we think are going to work out. And from there, I give you a piece to play. Usually about a month later, we'll have our first class of the year where all first year students will play to each other. And this is a really nice opportunity because it's the first time that you'll all have heard each other play in first year. And from there, we have classes throughout the year. We set you competitions to prepare for. You might play in a lunchtime concert. There's lots of opportunities. There's actually a weekly performance class called Chamber Music Tuesday, which is open to all. So that's the kind of summary, and we try and get the ball rolling as well as we possibly can for first years. And I've now been at the college for 4 years, and I'm really happy to say we've got a few groups in fourth year who are just finishing their undergrads right now, who've been in the same group as they started in the first week of term. And that's an amazing thing, really, because it means you get to make the most of all the opportunities at college. And to give you a very brief summary of some more of those, we have the main thing is just a huge amount of lessons. We have our internal tutors, a really incredible team of kind of experienced chamber music players. So that includes Pavel Fischer, Peter Prause, Suzy Mazaros, Magnus Johnston, really a whole range. And you can sign up to those regularly. We also have guest tutors. So if there's a quartet that's coming through Manchester to do a concert, it's very likely that sign-ups will go up and you will be able to nominate yourselves for a lesson with those tutors. And alongside that, we have a few resident groups. My quartet is one of them. And so you might have the chance to have a day rehearsing with us, perhaps a Brahms sextet. You might play a concert with us, an octet. We've done Beethoven's Grosse Fugue, where we led a small string orchestra, all sorts of kind of opportunities like that. We try very much to promote a positive, enthusiastic, encouraging department. It's all about trying to bring the best out in each other and encourage each other as we go along. That's how chamber music should be in my mind. So we try and keep it good and healthy like that. I'm glad to say that the students that you'll see here amongst us are all heavily involved in chamber music. And I'm sure that they can answer some more questions as we go along. As am I. Very happy. If there are any questions, please just put them in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer them as we go. Chris, is there anything else you would like me to say?
That sounds perfect. Summed up beautifully there, Donald.
Thank you very much.
Very much. So, as I said at the start, hopefully you've had the opportunity to watch the speech which me and Catherine Yates did in advance of this online open day. And I think ours came in quite long at about 22 minutes because I wanted to try and answer some of your questions in advance, and it gives you a chance to watch that video again and hopefully you'll be a bit more informed. At the end of this meeting, we're going to try and answer your questions. Maybe you'll be posting them on the chat section or you can speak them out to us, and any of the 7 of us here will try and answer those as best we can. But I thought today, more than just a fact-finding mission, I thought we'd give this session a bit of an educational twist so that you can go away with some tips on how to practice and how to get ahead. It's something which really interests me, and every autumn I give a lecture on this subject, and I like developing this lecture year on year and finding out a bit more on this subject. And it strikes me that when we're thinking about practicing, the first question that seems to come up is how much should I do? And it's funny, isn't it, how, you know, we express our practice in terms of our blocks. You know, I did my 4 hours today, rather than talking about it in terms of productivity or what we actually did inside those sessions. And I wanted to talk a little bit about mental practice. That's the kind of work we can do when our instrument stays in its case. And so I'd like to start with a rhetorical question and say, do you actually have to be bowing or plucking in order for what you do to count as practice? And is it possible to do some really productive learning while your instrument is still in its case? And to my mind, practice is so much more than just exercising our fingers and our limbs. So I'll just give you a couple of quick examples. Lots of our practice time, even our lesson time, is spent learning notes and rhythms. And actually, with an instrument in your hand, it can be more difficult to do that because you're obviously thinking about hand shapes, technical matters, sound production. And one of the best ways of learning notes and rhythms is to sit and read the music slowly and patiently. And that could be a really, really cool way of learning that important part of music making. Here's another random example. If I'm learning, I am a cellist, but let's say I'm learning the Brahms Violin Concerto. If I make it my mission to go to concerts to hear performances of the Brahms Violin Concerto and performances of Brahms symphonies, is that helping me learn the piece? Yes, absolutely it is. And again, your violin is still in its case. So when would be a good time to do this kind of work? You might think that if you've had a full playing day already, maybe you've done lots of orchestra, you feel a bit achy and a bit stiff, perhaps the last thing you want to do is get your violin straight out of the box again and start practicing. So instead, you could have an hour or two doing some of this mental practice. Again, sometimes our situation doesn't allow us to practice. You probably wouldn't practice on a train. A few people have, by the way, in the days when they used to have guards carriages. And equally, if you want to have a late night practice session, it's not particularly sociable to be practicing after midnight. So again, you might want to return to this mental practice. But the most important reason why we might do it is because it's actually really smart work. And I'm just reading from some notes here. It's called the single most accelerated learning technique. And our cousins in the sports world use this lots. Loads of elite sportsmen, sportswomen spend considerable time preparing their minds for all aspects of their particular sports discipline. For example, you can imagine the high jumper who goes through that high jump hundreds and thousands of times in their mind, the preparation, the run up, the jump, the arch, you know, picturing themselves going over that bar. So you can see why it's such an important exercise. I'll just speak for a couple more minutes, but in a moment, I'm going to ask Catherine Yates to say some words herself, and she's going to talk about the value of working from the piano. But here's another one. I'd encourage you to keep up your oral training and your sight singing, and to take advantage of any tuition you can get in those areas. Sight singing, for example, is a really brilliant discipline, because if I'm playing an F and I need to shift up to a C sharp, first of all, I need to be able to hear that C sharp in my mind's ear, because if I can't hear it, how do I know if I've hit it when I've arrived there? Obviously, I can't check it against my open C sharp string. So this is why we need our sight singing. You might want to memorize your piece of music away from the instrument before you begin learning it. And I've practiced what I've preached, and on a few occasions I've committed a piece to memory before I've played it on the cello. And it's an amazing way to start learning a piece of music when you already know it from memory. Just think how refreshing that would be. If you want to know the truth, the times I've most often done that, it's been on my summer holidays on the beach, maybe with a Diet Coke in one hand and a score in the other. But in the autumn, when I've returned to work, there's a piece of music in there that I can start practicing. Another useful thing is interpreting our piece of music, because hopefully you agree that we interpret music with our minds and not with our fingers. I think it's our fingers and our limbs that deliver the interpretation, but our artistic concepts should start up here. And I strongly recommend singing your piece of music and shaping the phrases in your mind. As you read through the piece of music, imagine the colours and the shapes and the structure, and come up with your interpretation again away from the instrument, and then take that to your instrument. You might want to consider also the gestures and fingering patterns away from the instrument. I love that story when eBay first came out, and some person put up for sale an air guitar. And you probably know this, but when they opened the box, there was nothing in there because it was an air guitar. But similarly, whatever instrument you're playing here, you can practice the air viola. And as you do this, you can give yourself a little speech to yourself, a kind of a commentary, and talk to yourself about your posture, the types of shifts, the angle of your little finger if you're an upper string player, whether your thumb is rounded. And that's a really useful way of rehearsing a piece on your own without the instrument actually in your hands. And finally, from me, so we can feel more comfortable on stage, it's really good to spend time building positive mental images of yourself on stage and performing. Just picture yourself loving performing and the smiles on the audience faces, and just feed yourself lots of positive mental imagery about life as a performer. Anyway, this is all a bit different. I appreciate this might not be the traditional open day speech, but I just wanted to give you some thoughts to take away with you. And it gives you a little flavour of some of the way that we do things. So let me now hand over to my colleague, Catherine Yates, and I'm going to mute myself while you do some talking. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kath.
Thanks very much, Chris. It's really interesting hearing thoughts about practice at this time, and it's been an extraordinary time, of course, for everybody with the lockdown currently as it is, but it's been very interesting for us because we've had to come up with alternative forms of assessment for our students where they would normally be doing a live recital, and in fact our current first and second years would have been doing those just a couple of weeks ago. In fact, the first years, I think, Chris, yours would have been last week, wouldn't it? I think. So as part of the alternative assessments, our students have been writing the most amazing self-evaluation reports. And what's been particularly interesting is how they've been developing as really good practices and independent thinkers, and really evolved over their first year with us to become very productive. And it's something that we can all be thinking about all the time. And what I thought I'd just talk about a little bit is, I think it's, again, particularly relevant at this time, because a lot of us are so used to making music with other people and love that part of musical life. And of course, we can't really do that in the normal way at the moment. So the idea of learning a piece of music that is written originally for 2 players or maybe more is that little bit more difficult because we can't literally be doing it. And come to think of it, not many of us have, should we say, a tame pianist in the cupboard that we can bring out to play our Brahms sonata with when we're practicing. The lion's share of the learning that we're doing of these, our repertoire, may well be literally in isolation and metaphorically too. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the benefits of using your piano part or your piano reduction of your orchestral part if you're working on a concerto, and particularly if you're looking at particular repertoire for auditions that might be coming up in the autumn. How important it is to have the complete picture there for you. You might liken just learning one part of a complete thing to hearing just one side of a telephone conversation. You can glean so much and you can try and fill in the gaps and guess at what the other person is saying, but you could be guessing wildly out. You could also liken it, of course, to learning the script of a play without having any idea of what the context is, what the other actors on stage would be saying. So I think it would be just great for us to be thinking about the usefulness of having the piano part at your side at all times. Some of you may be good pianists, some of you may be lapsed pianists. I might describe myself as one of those. But even if you can't physically play what's in front of you, you can, as Chris has been alluding to, using your inner ear and your imagination to think, why on earth why would a composer choose this particular way of writing something? What's the implication of that? What does it make me feel like? What's it doing in creating atmosphere, pace and shape in the music, for example? So you can still work on this even if you can't physically play it yourself. Maybe you can find the chords, and this is one of the most important things that we have to deal with, isn't it? It's harmony and structure and how harmony works to inform what we feel about things. And we're absolutely so committed here at this institution to make sure that all of our musicians can really key into their instincts, of course, and play in the most sincere and authentic, emotional and expressive way that they can, but also that they've got fantastic foundation that they can justify intellectually why they've made any of the interpretive decisions that they make, and to deepen their interpretive strengths, if you like. So what I thought I'd do is I've just been thinking. I've got one of my students working on the Debussy violin sonata at the moment, actually, and of course she hasn't had access to the piano part. And if we were in a lesson together in real life, I would be sketching out bits for her and discussing things, and we'd be experimenting. And of course, we had to be doing things in a slightly different way. But I thought what I'd just do is just spend a minute or so just sketching out how I might myself encourage somebody to look at the evidence and why, and the sort of things that one could be thinking about. Perhaps some of you at the moment are working on some early 20th century repertoire, or maybe late romantic repertoire, and of course harmonic colour is something that's really important, as well as texture and the energy and rhythmic drive that maybe a piano part would give you. So literally, I'm no pianist, so don't worry, this is I'm not going to play very much of this at all, but I just wanted to just get oneself sort of attuned to the whys, really, of certain aspects of music. So obviously I'm going to be playing a few chords here. I will not be playing the violin part at the same time, and maybe some of you know the piece, but even if you don't, I think we can usefully talk of a concept here. So this piece is written in G minor, and it starts with the piano alone, simply with the G minor chord, which goes straight to C major. So important to have worked this out, G minor to E major. So of course he's absolutely in the moment, ramming together keys that on first thought don't really go. So what does that mean? Well, to me, I'm thinking G minor, there's a darkness here, it's written pianissimo, so there's an intimacy there immediately. There's a darkness maybe in the atmosphere, and a little gleam of light with the C major here, and of course the registration has taken it upwards. We go back here, violin enters, and some syncopated material, we get our little C major chord again, we get a rest in both parts, and then E flat minor, which now is written to be louder and with a little bit marked. So this is surprising, really unexpected. And then we get this lovely ninth, which feels, to me anyway, it's all very personal. You might have your own spin on this. Very dreamy, slightly sort of smoky atmosphere maybe. We then get a G minor chord again, and then it's back to C major, but how it's registrated now, low, feels very comforting, as if we've gone on some kind of real emotional sparky journey in just those short eight or 10 bars. And then we get this, quite anticipating and full of tension, and then the music gets underway. He puts now a second beat rhythm, which goes on for quite a few bars there. So this is where the music is picking up and really getting underway. So you can apply this to anything that you're learning, and of course, many conservatoire audition requirements are to learn a classical concerto. So I beg you to get the piano part out, get a score out, listen to when the wind come in. Oh, there's some horns there. Why? Why does he put the flute in at that point? Or look at when Mozart particularly is so clever at stopping the orchestra at various points to add space and a sense of flexibility and an extra sense of creativity, if you like, and to really help you find dialogue and different characterizations and things. So I think it would be just such a valuable, let's see this lockdown. We're getting glimpses of our freedom coming hopefully soon, but use the time when you don't have access to another musician to further your own exploration. We've got to be detectives, really, haven't we? We've got to see the evidence on the page. And I often think, well, of all the choices that there are in the world, why choose that? And there will be a reason. And if you can find your own reaction to that reasoning, you'll have a stronger interpretation for it. So have that piano part out to your side always. Learn from it, off it, if you like. And if you don't have access to a keyboard, listen to recordings, but forensically listen to what the piano part is doing, and see where it takes you, because it opens up a world of possibilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kath. Thanks for that. So what we'll do now, I'll ask some of the other people involved with this meeting to speak in no particular order, but for the sake of argument, let's do it in the order in which you appear on my screen. So next to Catherine Yates is Jacob Barnes. Would you like to talk to us for a minute? Are you all right unmuting yourself? There you go. Thanks. Over to you, Jacob.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. So I'm Jacob. As I said before, I'm coming to the end of my time here at RNCM. And I've recently been reflecting on my time here. I have many great memories from studying at RNCM and have had many fabulous opportunities. So while I was deciding which to talk about today, I was considering what would be the most useful to hear as a prospective student. When I was looking at conservatoires, I didn't consider many of the things that I would now say are important to look at. And so I thought I'd briefly share some of those and ultimately why I think RNCM is such an excellent place to study in light of them. So when I was a prospective student, my focus was on which teacher I would have and the reputation of the college. And these are both important aspects, but I would say when it comes down to it, there are many exceptional conservatoires, across Europe, the RNCM being one of them, and they all have great teachers. So you will almost definitely find someone who you work well with at any kind of high standard institute. But with that in mind, perhaps one of the most important things to consider are your prospects after studying. RNCM offers so much opportunity to follow your interests and broaden your playing, which is becoming more and more important for classical musicians. While I've studied at RNCM, I've been able to pursue so many such a range of areas, including chamber music. I've done jazz, I've done folk, I've worked with professional orchestra, and I've developed research skills. I've worked with the pop course at RNCM, and I'm teaching regularly. So I've really built a foundation to start kind of building a career now. And all of these things are in support of my main focus, which is improving at the cello. And I would say for anyone debating whether to study music at conservatoire or university, I would say there is ample opportunity to learn musicological topics. And from leading experts at RNCM is something that I had to debate. But the breadth of things you can follow here makes that very easy to do. So I would say studying here kind of really does cover all bases, and it really helps you to find a career that's right for you. That's been my experience so far. I would also consider where you would like to be located, because Manchester is really a wonderful place to study, and I think the benefits of being here can often be overlooked. For a start, you can live very close to college. All new students are offered a place at St Charles Groves Halls, which is right next door to college. And even if you choose not to live there, you can get accommodation within 5 minutes of RNCM, which, at the end of it, saves a huge amount of time, which can be applied to practice or to working, or even to gain sufficient rest, which I think is so important. Manchester is also an up-and-coming city, so opportunities to work and perform are growing, and I found that they're available to all years. I was doing so many kind of orchestral things around Manchester, even in my first year. So I think that's a huge advantage. And also, obviously Manchester's home to some really great orchestras, which is amazing. As Chris said earlier, the music college experience shouldn't just be about practice and rehearsals, but actually engaging with live music and in other ways. So I think that's a really invaluable experience and one I've treasured. And on that note, I think what experience you want is very important as well. When people come to RNCM, they're usually struck by what supportive environment it is, and that's something I certainly felt while being here. And I think this applies to staff and students, because everyone wants you to do well. For example, the open class policy at RNCM kind of lets you interact with other instrument tutors and take part in seminars and modules and masterclasses, and it's a really great environment to be learning in. So, in summary, I would say, do consider, of course, what teacher is right for you, but do try and take in all these other aspects as well, because they're a lot more important than I initially realised. So thanks for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you for that, Jacob. That's brilliant. And he'll be around to answer some of the questions. We'll either type the answers or say the answers shortly when we finished this part of the meeting. So next up is Beth. How are you doing, Beth?
Hi. So yeah, I'm Beth. As I said before, I play viola and I studied it at RNCM. So I guess my pathway was slightly different to any of the students you've got here at the moment, in that I did my undergrad elsewhere. I was at Welsh College for my undergrad, and then I came here in 2016 to do the Halle String Leadership Scheme, which is, I don't know if any of you guys know about it. It's mostly for kind of slightly older students, I suppose. And you get to do, what is it? I think it's £10,000 worth of paid work with the Halle, whilst being kind of associated with the college. So during that year, I was also in a string quartet, and I had, I think it's 10 hours of lessons you get with a one-to-one teacher. So I had that, and then I had a year off where I freelanced in Manchester. So like Jacob said, there's so many orchestras. You've got Halle, BBC Phil, Manchester Camerata, Liverpool, Opera North, kind of just slightly further afield. So there's a lot of scope for freelancing, which is obviously fantastic for anyone who wants to do anything like that playing wise. There's just so much opportunity. And then I came back in 2018 because I hadn't had enough, and I did a course which is called Continuing Professional Development, which is basically whatever you want it to be. So what I got was some lessons with Vicky again, and with Vite, who's a visiting teacher. He comes over from I think he possibly lives in Switzerland. I'm not quite sure, but he comes over and he's absolutely incredible. He did watched him do the Walton Concerto with the Halle last year, and it was just absolutely incredible. So obviously the teachers that are visiting and also who work there full time are just the most amazing musicians and teachers. And I've had some lessons this year with Lucy Nolan as well, who's fantastic. So I guess I've had quite a different route in that I was older than a lot of the other students. I was 26, I think, when I started CPD. So I had, I guess, different set of experiences and a different set of what I wanted to gain from the course. And I think, considering where I was when I started at RNCM and where I am now, it's just proof that it's a really fantastic college, because I'm on trial at the moment with 2 orchestras, which is principal for Ulster Orchestra and co-principal for an opera company in Sweden, which is exciting. So I guess some of the main highlights for me is chamber music. Like Donald said, it's a really positive place, and I think, particularly being on the Halle scheme, it helped integrate me into the string department and helped me make lots of friends. So there's these kind of swap shop things that you do. Like there was a Brahms sextet, got to do Mendelssohn octet. That was with Lily, actually, who we'll talk in a second. We got to do that in Italy, which is another thing I need to talk about, which is each year the RNCM takes I don't know how many students go actually, but a symphony orchestra worth of students over to Montepulciano, which I think for me was probably the highlight. It's a really, really nice social experience, and you get to play, so much repertoire over 2 weeks. I think that's probably it from me. So thanks for listening, and yeah, questions, just send them my way.
Brilliant. Thanks, Beth. Nice to see you again. Hope you're doing all right. So let's move now to Chris Newton, who is a first-year student, and he can tell you something about his first year, which, to be honest, hasn't ended quite the same way it started. But there's a little matter of a pandemic that came our way. But let me hand over to you, Chris. Thanks.
Cool. So I've been asked to give a brief summary of my first year in review. I think the most enjoyable part of it has been that everybody at college is just so welcoming and encouraging. And in my experience, at least, I've encountered very little rivalry between people. Everyone's there to cooperate and encourage each other. It's great. And one of the first experience I have of string orchestra was when we were playing the Elgar Serenade for Strings, and Chris Hoyle asked us all to randomly swap seats so that we could experience what it was like to play in all the different desks in our sections. I think this really highlights how everyone at the RNCM is treated very much equally, which is a real credit to our staff. On top of this, there's an emphasis on the individual development of the students. So, for example, I was given an opportunity to conduct and record a composition of mine with the first year string orchestra, even though I'm not a composition student. It was an amazing experience, and everybody involved was so encouraging and positive about it. So I hope that they got just as much out of it as I did. Another big part of RNCM life I've experienced so far is chamber music. So this year I spent must have been 4 to 6 hours a week rehearsing with my quartet, which has been really great to experience. So I've noticed after playing with your chamber group for a while, if it's working for all of you, there's moments where everyone in the group just really connects briefly, which for me has been one of the most enjoyable parts of playing in a quartet. So I'll give you an example. There was one of these moments when we were playing the second movement of Mendelssohn's A minor quartet in the Nosek Prize, which Donald was on the panel for. When our cellist, James, he suggested a few minutes before we performed that we drop the dynamic down right at the end of the movement, so to give a bit more of an effect. And the result of that was one of these brief moments of just absolute connection. It was everything seemed to just work together, and it was really a really great moment for all of us. And that's why chamber music for me has been so important at college. Not to mention that all the chamber music staff and coaching opportunities are fantastic. It's worth getting as much coaching as you can from as many different coaches as possible. yeah, all is to say that if you're going to choose a college that fits all of these characteristics that I've talked about, then RNCM is the one for you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Chris. That's great. So now over to Lily. Why on earth did you spend 6 years here?
Hi. I love it. I miss it so much. Just hearing you guys all talking about it is making me really sad that I'm not there anymore. But no, I if you can tell, I absolutely love the RNCM. I did my undergrad there, and then I thought about going somewhere else for a postgrad, and then decided, why would I do that? That's a silly idea. If you're having a good time, don't change anything. So I didn't, and I stayed, and I'm really, really grateful I did. I think there's such a sense of community. I've written some notes as everyone's been speaking, and I just wrote community. I think there's a real sense of community, and everyone looks out for each other, and everyone encourages each other and supports each other, and you just learn from everyone around you, whether that be the staff or the students. Everyone just helps you become this more rounded musician, which is brilliant. And like everyone said, the chamber music department is fab. I played lots of different people over the years, including Beth, which was really fun. Had like a long-term quartet, but then also did lots of little projects with different people, and Elias as well at one point. That was fun, and played with Chris and Kath sometimes just for fun, because they often ask students just to come if they've got some free time and just play along with them, and it's so lovely and you learn so much. So it was the chamber music department was really, really special, I think, and yeah, I miss it. I don't do so much chamber music playing anymore, and I really do miss it. Been a little bit more here and there, but yeah, it's really, really good. And my thing is orchestral playing, and the RNCM was brilliant for that. It just prepared me really well for a future career in orchestral playing. I saw someone said, how do you freelance with professional orchestras? What would the process be? Well, the answer actually, because there's lots of opportunities to go in with other orchestras through different schemes. We run these the PES schemes, where you can go in with the BBC Philharmonic or the Manchester Camerata, and you just get to know these orchestras. They get to know you, and then auditions come up and they already know your faces, and it just gives you a bit of a foot in the door. And there's all staff coming from these orchestras in to do sectionals, excerpt classes, all this stuff all the time, so you can just get to know these people and they can get to know you, which makes it easier to sort of get your foot in the door. It's brilliant. What else? Master classes, that was great as well. I absolutely love the variety of visiting staff that come in and give master classes. I had some amazing ones over my time at college that have stayed with me forever and terrified me forever, but made me feel so much better in general. It's just, yeah, I love it. And I think you would all be really lucky to go and study there. I wish I could go back. I might yet, who knows? But yeah, if there's any questions, do ask, and I will try my best to answer.
Brilliant. Thanks lots for that, Lily. In a moment, Kath, I wonder whether you'd like to talk a little bit about entrance auditions and the question that often comes up is how many students do you take? So I'm just going to anticipate that question. But for now, I might just follow on from what Lily and Beth were saying about professional orchestras. And you may have heard during today that the word collaboration comes up quite a lot. That's something I'm really keen to promote, whether that's playing chamber music with staff or visiting musicians, or whether it's finding ways to get students playing in amongst professional orchestras. And, I would say that conservatoires are different. I mean, superficially, you would say you choose a conservatoire and you get some lessons and you practice. you do some orchestras and you do some academic work, and then you get a degree and you go home. But there are key differences, and I think that one thing that singles us out is the number of opportunities to collaborate. For example, we don't celebrate a relationship with an orchestra. We celebrate lots of relationships with a variety of orchestras. And people speaking to you today have talked about the BBC Phil, the Halle, the Manchester Camerata, the Liverpool Phil, which is just down the road, Orchestra of Opera North, which is the other way, an hour the other way. And then we work with Academy of Ancient Music, the Academy of St Martin in the Fields, Chamber Orchestra of Europe, the Mahler Chamber Orchestra. So even this week, one of our violinists has been asked to join the Chamber Orchestra of Europe, to join one of their schemes and to do some rehearsing and performing with them. So I think the sheer number of opportunities makes us different from other places. Let me hand over now to Catherine Yates, to my left. And I'll ask you to talk about entrance or auditions.
Sure, I'll do that. Just before I do, I'll just, if I may respond to this question, which is how have you adapted to teaching performing during COVID? Has it been successful? So I'll take that one first. Well, it was been quite a stretch for some of us. And I'm speaking personally, I've got 8 students and I've never done any online teaching at all before the end of March. It's amazing how you adapt, and actually I have to say it's been an incredibly productive time. There's a sort of different focus and intensity about the online teaching thing in itself, and because students have been, you know, maybe in a slightly less busy environment than they're used to, if they've managed to keeping their motivation up, which I've been so impressed with, I have to say, they're actually all getting better. It's fantastic. It's been really, really noticeable. And of course, there's no substitute for hearing sound live, and working on the subtleties of sound and stuff is that much more difficult online. But it's not to say that we haven't been able to do incredibly productive and useful stuff. So, you know, looking on to the autumn, I mean, we know we're going to be doing a mixture of some online teaching and some in the building, and there's nothing to suggest that it's not going to carry on being a very productive and fruitful way of working, really. But yeah, I'm dying to hear it online again, of course. But no, it has been very surprisingly productive. So yeah. And then I think we've also got, are you making changes to auditions in the autumn because of COVID? Well, so yes, we will be doing auditions. Basically, are going to be more of the recorded kind than the live kind, but that we will be looking for the same things, and we'll be asking for the same requirements, which are on the website, the pieces that we ask for. I mean, in a nutshell, we ask for 2 different kinds of repertoire. One is either Baroque or classical repertoire, and then something contrasting of your own choice. And at this point, I would usually say make sure it's repertoire that you love, make sure that you know it well. An audition, of course, for anything is not the time to pick up something new that you think, I'll just see how it goes. It's something that you want to have lived with for a while and really feel that it's well in your bloodstream, if you like. And I think it's important also that you know that when we're doing a live audition or looking at a recording, we're looking for potential. We're not looking for the finished product, all polished and shiny. We're looking for people who have an absolute passion for music, have a will to communicate something, clearly have instinct, have a sense of inquiry, and hopefully have some good technical stuff that they've already been helped with. Of course, part of your being at a place like this is to get better as a technician and train your hands. But we're looking fundamentally for potential, really, passion, definitely, sense of communication, desire to say something musically, for sure.
Great. Thanks, Kath. I'll talk just for a moment about how you're placed with a teacher and the first thing I should say straight away is that it's a dialogue, and it's a consultation process between you, me, Catherine Yates, and the teachers in question. We never force a tutor on anyone, not at all. What happens at the audition? We're taking notes. There'll be a panel of 2, sometimes 3 people, and we're writing about your strengths and your weaknesses and your potential as well. Of course, we also know all our tutors, and we know where their passions and their own interests lie. And we reckon that we can match you with teachers that meet your particular needs. So we might suggest 2, maybe 3 tutors to you, but similarly, you might say to us, I'm interested in this person or this person. And out of this discussion, you might end up having a small number of consultation lessons with these teachers. And at the end of the process, the decision is yours. And I should say that once the tutor and the potential student are happy, that's an absolute promise. We'll never like get you here and then say, well, it can't happen after all. No, it's an absolute promise that you will come here and that person will be your teacher and it will have been your decision. So I just wanted to anticipate that question. I can see in the chat box there's a comment about someone who's a harpist and a viola player. But I think it's an interesting one, this. If you had the opportunity to hear the speech that we gave, that pre-recorded speech, I talked to you about a student of mine called Awan, who was a cellist, but she also told me about her interest as a singer. And I saw her taking part in RNCM chamber choir concerts. She's also a folk musician. She got a folk group together and toured quite a lot with them, won some competitions, performed on national radio. So for her, we were encouraging her to explore all her musical interests. And there are loads of students who would say similar things, like Chris, who spoke to you earlier. You know, he's had an opportunity to have, he's a violinist, a very, very good violinist, but he wrote this particular short piece of music, and we gave him an opportunity to play it with the first year string orchestra and to conduct it and to record it. So just to say, we do our best to help you to make the most of the many opportunities here. Somebody said there's an open class policy, and that means no matter what you learn, you can go to the classes of other teachers. So you can go to all the piano master classes if you like, sit in on piano tuition. You could spend your time in the composition department learning there. So just to make you aware that that's available to you. So are there any other questions which you'd like to add to the chat room, and anything which you'd like us to talk about? It says here, Jeanette raised her hand, but I don't know what to do about that.
Can I just ask a question over, like,
there you are, Jeanette.
the microphone? So I've already had a consultation with a viola teacher at RNCM, and I think she's also said that she'd be happy to take me as well. Would I let you know that in the auditioning process, or?
Okay. I'm afraid I didn't quite hear that. I don't know if somebody else heard that and they could take that question.
I'd just say, Jeanette, it's great. What if auditionees have already formed, you know, some kind of teaching relationship, maybe on a course or a festival or something with a teacher? Feel free to mention this audition, and then we can chat about that if an offer is made to study, and if a teacher and a student want to work together, why would we stand in their way? I'll put it that way.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking the question. Donald, would you like to answer the question that's been put in the chat box? I don't know if you can see it, about choosing teachers for chamber music or something like that. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, basically in chamber music, there's a huge range of teachers that you could see. And what generally happens is that I kind of oversee all the groups, and if and then as groups try out different tutors, they might form a good relationship with someone and start seeing them regularly, or they might just decide that actually they get the most from seeing a huge amount of different people, so they might try and see someone different every week. So it's kind of tailored to each group's needs, really. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Donald. I wonder if any of the students and former students here would like to talk for a couple of minutes about Manchester. Maybe just tell us how you find the vibe in the city, things like travelling around, costs, general atmosphere.
Actually, maybe Chris, you could take that one if you wouldn't mind, and maybe if you could give I don't know if you've seen, there's a question about what the typical week for a first year student might look like. So maybe you could give us a bit on both of those if you don't mind. Thank you.
So the general atmosphere in Manchester, I guess I could just comment that there's everything that you would need is very close. Like, so for a week's shop, if you're living at Halls, it's just, I don't know, I'll go to Lidl, which is basically a 15-minute walk down the road, and to get everything there, then just come back. It's very easy, and there's right next to the college is the Manchester University. It's like a shopping complex with little restaurants and everything there. There's a big bookshop, Blackwell's bookshop. I don't know if you've been, but it's a really lovely environment, and like everything that you need is literally at your doorstep. And so the next question about the what does a week look like? So for me, so in terms of practice, it's about 3 to 4 hours a day. I would do that for about 6 days a week and just have a rest for the seventh day. And so lectures are on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I don't know if that's going to change at all, but that's from my experience. Generally the timetable is quite sparse, so that you can fit in everything else that you want to do for yourself in there, and that includes rehearsals with like chamber groups and other stuff. You also get 1 hour's worth of individual tuition with your principal tutor, and performance classes with the rest of the people that your tutor teaches, which is really useful if you want to get better at performing. I found that one of the most useful things, because then you get to sort of have your debut, as it were, like performing to people at the college as a soloist, and it's a really great tool to work with. So I hope that answers your question.
Great, thanks for that. I'll just talk for a moment about borrowing instruments. And if you guys want to just check out some of the questions in the chat room, maybe you could help me answer some of those in a minute. But just to say, we've got a pretty large collection of really good instruments, including some expensive Italian ones, let's say. And I'm also in the habit of commissioning brand new instruments from what I consider to be Europe's best makers. And we can put one of these instruments in your hands, particularly if you're someone who's got quite a poor instrument or even no instrument at all. And you can have that instrument for the full 4 years. I sometimes jokingly say it's like having something of similar value to a brand new BMW put in your hands for the duration of your 4-year course. And increasingly what we're trying to do is lend you that instrument as well for the first year beyond college. And that's the year when you're typically doing lots of auditions and going for work opportunities, so you could borrow it then as well. So that goes for all instruments, harps, guitars, double basses, all the bowed string instruments. So that's that. Let's just have a look and see if there's another question. I don't know if anyone would like to come in on some of those. Actually, whilst I'm here, I can see one on scholarships. The way we do it here is we tend to, when we do offer scholarships, it would be called an entrance award, which is against your first year's fees, rather than dividing it by 4 and distributing it over 4 years. So that's just how we do it in Manchester. Just on that subject, I did read some independent figures that said cost of living in Manchester is basically quite cheap. Some say it's about £3,500 per year cheaper than down south. And a student has said to me, well, at £3,500 cheaper per year, that's like having a £14,000 scholarship over the duration of my course. But I think, the little things add up. And in sports, they talk about marginal gains. So, it's important to take the most of advantages and savings here and there. The fact you have no transport time and no transport costs to worry about. You've got more money in your pocket, so you can go to concerts at the Bridgewater Hall. You can join gyms. You can eat fresh vegetables. You don't have to eat chicken arms all the time. So they're just some thoughts about the time efficiency and cost savings of living and working in Manchester. Kath, over to you for a bit.
Shall I just take one of these questions briefly? I think it's quite a quick one. This is from Jeanette, that are musicology classes taught in small classes or lecture type situations? Well, it's a mixture, basically. Some things would be for a whole cohort, and some things would be more would be smaller and more specialised. And musicianship classes, etc., are quite small. Jacob, do you want to say anything about how you found that side of life?
Yeah, I just add to that as well. You can specialise, particularly as you go through your 4 years, and kind of get more insight as to what you're interested in. This year, I did an independent research project where I did really kind of focused work related to performance studies and areas related to that. So there is lots of opportunities, and like I said before, there are some amazing musicologists at college and really people at the top of the field. So there's lots of opportunities to explore that. I also saw a question about early music, so I'll just touch on that as well. I was very interested in Baroque and kind of Baroque playing, so I've been able to borrow a Baroque cello for the 4 years of my study at RNCM, which has been amazing. And I've had a Baroque cellist comes in and do for other string instruments as well. And I've learned with her, so that's been an amazing opportunity. And in second year, we had Baroque cello classes, so we would all learn how to do this together. So again, that's kind of supportive environment for these things. So I suppose in some ways, it's if you want something and are interested in it, you can pursue it, and there are lots of opportunities to do that.
Great, thanks, Jacob. Does anybody else want to come in with something that springs to mind? Donald, over to you.
I think Beth's going to maybe answer the violin viola question, perhaps.
Thanks, Donald. Yeah, so I guess that's very relevant to what I've done, which was violin for my undergrad with kind of viola as a second study, and then a postgrad just in viola playing. And I occasionally play around on the violin now, but really not so much. So I guess the things that you might want to weigh up are who you would want as a teacher. So if you find someone who you click with completely, who will kind of inspire you and motivate you and make you want to play kind of one or the other, then that might be a good kind of easy way to pick. I think now that I do a lot of viola, and because I'm constantly doing kind of auditions and working, I don't need to do so much of kind of my own practice on sort of certain repertoire. So I'm basically just doing Bartok and Hofmeister all the time in excerpts on repeat. But the thing that I think is very striking is, I suppose when I was playing violin, it was just kind of piece after piece that I was like really desperate to learn, like Kath playing the Debussy before, and I learnt that and it was amazing. And I think maybe the viola just doesn't have quite so much repertoire. There's loads and loads of stuff that's modern, so you've got all the Hindemith sonatas and concerto and, you know, Bartok, Walton, all this stuff, but not quite so much kind of, you know, there's a bit of classical. It's maybe not as inspiring as the Mozart concertos, perhaps Stamitz and Hofmeister, but yeah, maybe just the repertoire isn't for me quite as satisfying. But as an instrument, I would far rather be playing viola now. I think it suits me a lot. So I guess you just need to decide kind of what you want most. And I would also say that I think it's easier to freelance perhaps on viola. I think if I was playing violin, I wouldn't have had the opportunities. So I hope that answers your question a little bit.
I'd add as well that, you know, it's we like to see ourselves as very flexible in this regard, and if somebody you know, is a violinist who wants to have some viola help and be involved in college in certain ways as a viola player, we'll do our very best to help them, certainly. And as someone who plays both myself and loves it, I see the value personally in keeping both going. But it's different for everyone, isn't it? And that's what we'd like to try and accommodate if we possibly can.
Yeah, and if I may just say on Kath's behalf, because she's very modest, that sometimes we'll see her striding out of the building to do a gig as a section leader on the violin. Sometimes she's zooming off to do a chamber music concert on the viola. Very often I'm walking past her room, have a little peep in through the glass window, and she's playing the piano part to a major romantic sonata or whatever. So I think, all right.
No. Brahms sonatas, no. That's not strictly true. Judiciously picked and sketched in, I would say.
No, but I think it's a good role model, because I think you know, learning the piano is great for teaching, and having the versatility to be both a violinist and a viola player, again, is really important. Donald, do you want to talk for a little minute about your two parallel interests on different sides of music making?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you probably can tell already, I'm from Scotland, and I grew up in a rural area with family who played a lot of folk music. So that's the kind of other side to what I do. I play in the quartet and teach at the college, and then I also play a lot of folk music and improvise and write music. So yeah, that's something I've done a bit of in college. Hopefully we're going to do some more of it in the future. And so if there's anyone here that has that as an interest, then do give me a shout, and we can look at doing it in the future. But it's a bit like, I kind of see it a bit like, you know, playing the violin and viola. You're going to learn a huge amount from each instrument, and you'll take it into the other thing that you do. And I find that it's exactly the same with folk music and classical music. I learn huge amounts from them both, and I hopefully take elements of one into the other, and I find that hugely valuable and also just hugely enjoyable.
Great, thanks, Donald. Lily, maybe don't want to make you jump, by the way, it was a good sneeze then.
It was a good sneeze, bless you.
Thank you.
I'll just talk for a minute. If there's anything you want to say about life in the BBC Phil, let's say, as a young professional starting out, what you guys are up to in a minute. But I'll just answer the question about from Abby about the kind of students that the panel is looking for. This comes back to the audition situations where we're not looking for this so-called perfection. I'd say we're looking, do you know that expression, a diamond in the rough? I think we're looking for potential, people who are curious, people with temperament. It's not a crime to play a note out of tune, but we'd like to see that you can adjust that note. And we also really like the interview part of entrance auditions as well, where people, they come out of themselves a bit more and tell us something about their wider musical interests. They tell us, you know, what composer they're into this month. Sometimes they tell us about their interests in folk music or football or their private butterfly collections. And but just to say, we're not looking for a fixed number of students. We're looking more for the right type of students, people who've got an appetite to learn and who really want to make the very best of the opportunity. Lily, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Is there anything you want to just share about what's going on in the BBC Phil and Manchester music scene right now?
Yeah, so I joined the BBC Phil in my last year of college. So I've got a 50% job with the BBC Phil, and I did my last year of my masters at the same time, which was balmy. It was a bit mental, but it happened. I did it. I got through it, so that was good. I love that there's a really strong connection between the BBC Phil and the college. It's really great. In lockdown, there's been PES, the PES schemes that I mentioned before. Even though the students can't come into the orchestra, they've been doing online exit classes and things, and we've been asked to send little videos in, motivational videos and stuff, to try and keep that connection. And I think was it last year or some other time, there was a BBC Philharmonic side-by-side project. So it was a member of the BBC Phil got to sit next to a student. I opted out of that one because I was like, that would be a bit weird for me maybe last year. But that's a really good project. I think they do it with a different orchestra every year, I think, or something. So that's really, really good. But yeah, we've just been doing lots of remote recordings in lockdown, and it was quite cool. I got a chance to do a solo recording this week, which I've had properly edited and everything. So that's really cool. We might get to see what that sounds like soon. Hope it sounds okay when it's all been put together. But that's been really fun. And yeah.
Good, great, thanks Lily. So I'm thinking we should probably draw this session to a close now. It's an unusual thing for us. We've never done an online open day before. It's a bit weird, to be honest, because obviously everyone's got their screens off, so it's a bit like staring into a black hole. But I trust you're all there smiling, and I hope you've enjoyed this session. If you've got any more questions, you can just contact the RNCM on any address, even info@RNCM, and the question will make its way to the right person eventually. And we'd love to meet you at an entrance audition or at a concert here. Every January we have a big strings festival, mid-January, where we just basically invite the best artists in the world. You don't have to go to Vienna to hear them, or New York, or Berlin. Similarly with the Chamber Music Festival, it's just the truth. We get the best artists in the world, and we give concerts alongside them, give masterclasses. It's great fun. So maybe we'll see you at one of those. Chris Newton, did you want to just say something? Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just to say that there's also the UniBuddy app that's being used by some of the student ambassadors today, if you want to contact any of the current students and just ask them some questions. Oh, Chris, you're muted.
I'd just say as well that there's always the old-fashioned email as well, if anybody would like to email directly. It's absolutely fine.
Great, thanks, Kath. So thanks everyone for contributing. Donald, Kath, Jacob, Beth, Chris, Lily, nice to see you all again. It's a treat for us to see real faces and connect with staff and students again. As I say, really hope we can see you all at an audition or at a concert here, and all the very best. Take care. Bye.